guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing a movie review. This movie is a horror film from the United States, English language, released in the year 2014, directed by Bobby Rowe, and this film is called The Houses That October Built. So the story of The Houses That October Built, you've got a group of friends who are thrill seekers and they're looking for the ultimate adrenaline rush at a haunted house. So haunted houses, very much a very popular attraction in the United States, not so much in Australia or Argentina, but in the United States a lot of people go to these haunted houses in order to be scared. And so it's that rush that these group of friends are looking for, but at the same time they're making a documentary, and this documentary is surrounding how hard it is these days to make people scared, and that these haunted house actors who are responsible for making these scares, what they're willing to go to, the lengths that they're willing to go to in order to get that scare without actually hurting someone. So the question is begged as to whether or not you can scare someone these days without hurting them, and so this is the documentary that they're making. So they're going from haunted house to haunted house in the countryside, but to their horror they realise that some very strange things are happening and they seem to be following them, but they don't know whether or not this is all part of an act or in fact their lives are in danger. So as the situation becomes increasingly bizarre with each haunted house that they visit, ultimately their goal is to the extreme haunted house, which is right at the end, and so this is set to be the extreme, the mother of all extreme horror haunted houses, and so they're trying to get there, but whether or not these strange occurrences are going to stop them from getting there, something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on The Houses That October Built. I put off seeing this film for such a long time, and I know I shouldn't base my opinion on what others think of a film, but that is exactly what I did. And for the reason that a lot of people have slammed this movie, I waited so long to actually see it. But yesterday I saw the film, and I was blown away by how great this movie actually was. I in fact love this film, and it's one of my favourite found footage horror films because it is very different. It is a movie that does go into a very tired subgenre of recycled sort of generic rubbish, but it does have a life of its own, is because it does have a very interesting concept. You've got this group of friends, you've got the shaky cam, you've got all the problems with shaky cam, you know, why they detailing everything that's going on, and they're putting themselves in situations for the convenience of the film. But putting all that aside, the concept is what makes this film float, and it's ultimately what makes this film worth recommending, is because it is a commentary on horror these days. Not only horror, but the desensitization that the public have these days to sex, to violence, to all other horrible things, because back in the old days it was a lot easier to scare people because they didn't have the means of actually viewing these horrible things on the internet. You know, these days it's very easy to log onto the internet and watch a horrible execution video. It's a lot easier to go on the internet and just watch a porn movie. But in the old days you didn't have that access, so it was a lot easier to scare these people. They weren't desensitized, they were living in a bubble that was oblivious to, you know, the outside world. It was a lot easier to turn the other cheek to the horrible things. But these days, because we're a lot more open to today's world, it's a lot harder to really scare us. And so I thought that really applied to horror fans too. You know, the horror fans of yesteryear were a lot more tamer than they were today. And it's because, as I said, that exposure to horrible things, you know, on the internet and, you know, other means of you know, gaining these things, because it's a lot harder, these horror films naturally have had to get a lot more hardcore. And so back in the old days it wouldn't have happened, but these days it needs to progress and it needs to grow. In order to grow, you need to push the boundaries a lot more, and that's ultimately what this whole film is about, these haunted houses. Back in the old days, the haunted houses were a lot easier to scare people, but these days, as I said, because of the desensitization, they have to get a lot more extreme, and they're pushing the boundaries, and there's constantly questions being asked to these haunted house actors. Can you actually scare someone without hurting them? And so these haunted house actors, they give very interesting answers, and I thought that it was kind of like a mockumentary, and that mockumentary aspect of the film is what keeps the continuity going at a very brisk pace. Is that, you know, a lot of these films, a lot of these found footage horror films, they have very slow build-ups, and because it's just a particular story and it's a very generic story and you've seen it before, it can become very boring, and you're waiting for the horrible situations to happen, but the build-up, the slow build-ups to these other films are very boring because nothing particular is happening. But in this movie it is very slow in its build up, but it's very interesting because you're constantly seeing these people being interviewed, and it's making you think about this whole concept. So I thought that the concept intertwined with this horrible sort of story that these characters were facing was a very smart thing to do, because it does fill in the time in order to get to what the film is trying to do. So I really like the concept, and I think it is definitely what makes this film as interesting as it is. I thought subtly this is an extremely creepy film. I thought the suspense was through the roof, and it's the ambiguity to the whole film that is what keeps it floating, is that You don't know whether or not there's horrible things that are happening. Well, they're not so much horrible things, but they're just very unnerving things. And you think to yourself, is this part of an act, or is this actually happening? Are these people losing their mind and actually going down a path where they really shouldn't be? And because you're not terribly clear on what's going on, you have conflicting emotions, and because of that, you don't feel like you're in control. This director feels like he has you on, you're the puppet, and he is controlling you. He's controlling what you're thinking, and it feels like a movie that is not dumbed down for the masses. It is a movie that allows you to draw your own conclusion, and for that I have to applaud the director. I just thought subtly it was excellent. It does snowball from a creepy sort of feeling to something truly scary by the end of it, and I really like the way that it finished. It doesn't tie up loose ends, and I think that that's what creates the impact that the movie has. So as I said, there are some generic moments. There are some character conflicts that you've seen before. There are some jump scares. There are situations where they go to a certain place and you think to yourself, that wasn't very smart, but you feel that it's for the convenience of the progression of the story. So that aspect I didn't really like, but the concept of the whole film was absolutely fantastic, and that's what kept me interested from start to finish. As I said, there are fillers in the film where it feels like it's building to something, but because it's a very slow build-up, you've got the concept of the whole thing that keeps you interested. So you're willing to accept the build-up as opposed to something that just is waiting to happen. A lot of the other films, you see the build-up, but you don't really care what's going on. You're not really interested, and you're just waiting for the horrible things. But in this movie, you're waiting for the horrible things, but in the meantime, you've got something to distract you, and that's what I loved about this movie, and that's the reason why I highly recommend it to everyone out there who is a fan of found footage horror. I think this is one of the best found footage horror films to come out recently, and as a result of that, I'm going to give The Houses That October Built 4 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Next time, keep watching movies. I'll see you later. Bye.